want to thank you for joining our SAVE educational session about controlling AV electronic waste. There is no way when you throw it away. This is part of an educational series that SAVE is hosting on topics related to SAVE's mission to bring stakeholders together in the AV industry to take concerted action to achieve the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. This educational session will provide an overview on e-waste, how it's generated by the AV industry, and where it goes. The role of the AV industry in controlling e-waste directly relates to Goal 12 of the SDGs, which focuses on responsible manufacturing, reuse, repurpose, recycling, and reduction at every stage of the product life cycle. This begins with how materials are sourced to how we dispose of the products at the end of their useful life. We are hosting our educational session in a hybrid format with both in-person attendance in our SAVE office and with remote participation using Zoom as our video platform. We will use the chat feature for questions from the audience, and we'll have an interactive Q&A with our presenters and audience at the conclusion of our educational session. I would now like to introduce John Thomas and Joe Perez, who will be our presenters for this educational session. John Thomas is on SAVE's board of directors and our education committee. After 40 years in the AV industry, John retired from Visitech in 2020 and joined Miami University's Project Dragonfly Master's Program to focus on sustainability. He's been researching e-waste in the AV industry to advocate for a set of best practices in relation to sustainable commercial AV electronics, disposal and recycling. Joe Perez is on SAVE's board of directors and is chair of the Save a Second Life Committee. With over 25 years in the AV industry, Joe is the CTO of ClearTech, an AV integration company headquartered in Altadena, California. Joe is very active with NSCA, serving on the DEI Action Council and Emerging Technologies Committees. Joe is an ambassador of the NSCA Foundation Ignite program, whose mission is to attract the next generation to our industry. With that, I hand it over to John Thomas.
Thanks, Christina. Welcome everybody to SAVE's educational session about controlling AV electronic waste for commercial AV integrators, resellers, distributors, consultants, and manufacturers. We hope that you'll see that you can make a positive impact on the ecological health of the world by adopting sustainable practices in our AV industry. SAVE supports a best practices approach to the way the commercial AV industry can replace, recycle, and repurpose commercial AV electronics and other materials. We believe that our industry can have an immediate and positive impact on our communities, as well as contribute to a healthier world. This session will provide a basic knowledge of electronic waste, how it's generated by the industry, where it goes. We'll review the impact on the environment, the toxicity of materials that are used in manufacturing, and how reckless disposal contaminates water, soil, and even the entire food chain, as well as threatens everyone's health. You're familiar, I'm sure, with consumer electronic waste, the cell phones, the computers, the monitors that are overwhelming recycling facilities. But most of us in the commercial AV industry don't think about the waste that we produce, which is somewhat different and often a little more intense than consumer electronics. The toxicity in disposed control systems, touch panels, signal processors, mixers, amps, video walls, projectors, all of it can be substantial. Our business, our AV business, relies on technology obsolescence and replacement for a large part of our revenue growth, and that results in a huge volume of discarded end-of-life products. $325 billion in new technology and services means a whole lot of old technology becomes electronic waste. Research has shown a direct relationship between the rate of replacement of outdated commercial electronics and the amount of waste it generates. Think about it this way. Every time a customer buys a new product, an old product is removed. For decades, there has been no industry recommendations or practices concerning AV electronics disposal or recycling. And I think you know there's little, if any, guidance by manufacturers for responsible disposal of their products. Think about the last time you or your company were involved in an AV project to upgrade and replace obsolete AV systems. There could be control processors, amps, LCD monitors, or even some old CRTs. What happened to all the stuff you removed? Chances are good that your customer said, just get rid of it, throw it away. But there is no away when it comes to electronics. Along with millions of other obsolete electronic components, it is likely that the unwanted remains were shipped to any number of underdeveloped countries where it was dumped or burned, releasing toxic waste and impacting the health of workers and their communities who were unaware of the hazards. But it doesn't stay there. If it's in the air or water or ground, it finds its way back home, often by way of the ocean. In 2019 alone, global electronic waste exceeded 59 million metric tons. How much of that came from the commercial AV industry? We just don't know. We have no information, no data. Our profession keeps no records for the disposal of obsolete commercial AV technology. And over the years, as we as an industry transition from analog distribution to digital and network protocols, we removed thousands of miles of analog cable, almost all of which is sheathed in PVC. According to the Center for Biological Diversity, PVC is considered hazardous and toxic if it's leached in the soil or waterways. Other toxic elements, and you can see them here with their impact on human health, are all part of the AV world, including lead, mercury, cadmium, lithium, chromium, and flame retardants. Even old CRT televisions used to contain anywhere from 4 to 6 pounds of lead to prevent a viewer's exposure to X-rays. So much so that the EPA has classified broken and junked CRT TVs as toxic. When was the last time you or your colleagues were trained on how to manage and dispose of these or other outdated electronics? Never, because the commercial AV industry has no standards or practices for the disposal of electronic waste. And that's what this program is designed to do, to help AV industry professionals to face the challenges of electronic waste. As an industry, we can establish a collaborative effort to fix a broken system. Our aim is toward a common goal of professional and ethical behavior that will benefit the well-being of our communities and our changing climate and environment. In the next segment, Joe will explore the basic life cycle of commercial AV equipment. You'll learn about the illegal shipping of electronic waste to developing countries and how it's improperly disposed, with the impact on our food supplies, air, and water. Joe?
Thank you, John. First, I'd like to take a poll with our participants here. You'll see on your screen there is a QR code, or you can join at slido.com, hashtag 1016858. So if you could please use your phones or your tablets and scan the barcode, the QR code, and answer these questions. How have you, or this question, how have you or your organization disposed of commercial AV waste? And I'll give you guys just another 30 seconds or so to log in your answers there, and then we'll continue. All right, it looks like that's a pretty popular one where we store the equipment in our warehouses until we figure it out. Been there and done that for sure. All right, just another few seconds and then we'll move forward. All right, well, thank you everyone for participating. So stored in a warehouse until we figure out what to do with it and tossed in a dumpster. I mean, Ty. Not surprising, but nevertheless, that's where we're at and that's why we're here. The AV business relies on technology obsolescence for large part of its revenue growth, which results in substantial volume of end-of-life products and end-of-use products. So what determines end-of-life or end-of-use? End-of-life is a manufacturer's decision to typically based on sales, application, or product costs. End-of-use means it can still function and be reused or repurposed. Sometimes the product is still actively being sold on the market, but something newer and better has come around and your customer says, replace it, which is good for the bottom line. More sales, more revenue. But how many of these items end up in a contractor's warehouse until they're thrown away? We just saw that poll, right? Those dead or unwanted items can become toxic waste because of rare earth materials and elements used in commercial AV electronics. And who ends up with the responsibility to dispose of it? It's not the manufacturer. But end-of-life technology upgrades are only two of the causes of electronic waste. Our industry throws out thousands of pounds of PVC-coated cables and connectors and plastic packaging. There's e-waste included with new products as well. Thousands of commercial AV items are shipped with external power supplies and cables to accommodate different international electrical standards. So what does an American customer do with power supplies that are meant for Europe or Asia? And what about the European or Asian customer, right? They are tossed in the trash by either their contractor or by themselves. Why can't manufacturers make just one power supply for each country standard and ship it with the product? There are likely tens of thousands of adapters buried in landfills being burned for their copper. In the last decade, recycling has often meant burning circuit boards, soaking microchips in acid and burning plastics to get rid of precious metals, burning insulated wire, which happens in many undeveloped nations just to retrieve its copper. Releases up to 100 times more cancer-causing dioxins than other waste. Once it's burned, it settles on the soil and water, making its way to our food supply. The federal EPA has regulations specific to hazardous waste. But what makes it hazardous is often misunderstood by many people. For example, the EPA does not define discarded intact electronics like old CRT monitors as hazardous. But if the cathode ray tube, which by the way can contain up to 4 to 6 pounds of lead, is removed, then it's labeled as toxic and hazardous. And even though electronic waste makes up only 2% of the materials in the US landfills, it's responsible for 70% of toxic heavy metals in those sites. When dumped, buried, or burned, these can eventually make their way to our water supply, marine environments, agricultural land, and ultimately the food chain, endangering both humans and animals. So we'll take another poll here, as you can see on your screen there. Once again, if you just joined, take your phones or your iPads, mobile devices, and scan that QR code. Or if you're on your computer, you can go to slido.com, hashtag 1016858, and answer this poll. What is the average lifespan of the most commonly used AV equipment? 4 to 6 years, 1 to 3 years, 7 to 9, or 10 plus. And we'll just give you guys a minute or so for the results, and we'll move forward. All right. Kind of looks like we're all in here. 4 to 6. Pretty typical. Yeah. All right. What do you think, John?
Well, I think 4 to 6 years probably is pretty telling, which means that if half of us, if this extends beyond just our group, half of us think that most AV equipment will be turned over in, let's say, an average of 5 years. That's an awful lot of AV waste that goes in a dumpster every 5 years. But of course, the technology advances even more quickly than that, which I think the 1 to 3 years number.
Right. So the 1 to 3 is pretty high up there as well, which
yeah.
I was expecting to see that. Well, I'll turn it over to John here. John will discuss the life cycle of equipment and can address how it's addressed through best practices.
Thanks, Joe. Our commercial AV industry is multi-layered. It's a community of manufacturers, distributors, reps, consultants, architects, designers, software developers, staging and rental companies, integrators. You know, as much as we all like to think that we have a cozy little industry where the business is relationship based, it's not. It's transactional. We make and sell, buy and sell, design and sell. Our success requires a lot of sell and technology obsolescence. And though AV technology is universally used, the final product represents a wide scope of disciplines. The infrastructure to integrate products is often excessive and needs more than just AV equipment to work. A standard integration, for instance, requires wired and wireless technologies, computer and internet interfaces, power conditioning, structural components like mounts and video wall structures, and plus lighting. When we upgrade or replace, there's more than just control systems, projectors, flat panels, mixers, and switchers that are sidelined. Let us know how you see things. Which sector of our industry do you think ends up with the responsibility to discard the castaways. So I'd like you to choose up to 2. So go ahead and scan the barcode, and we'll take a few minutes while you input your answers.
Hope you don't mind. I took the opportunity to fill in my answer as well.
It's really interesting. It's almost split between integrators, resellers, and customers. So it was almost obvious. Integrators and resellers and customers are the folks that are really stuck with getting rid of things. And that requires an awful lot of labor and a lot of exploration as to how to get rid of it. And oftentimes they take the path of least resistance. And it's called a big dumpster. You know, come by during our garbage pickup or a special pickup and just take it. So let's go on to the next chart and talk about the transactional process. These are associated roles and relationships within the commercial AV industry. In a typical transaction, manufacturers represent their products to design consultants, to resellers, to integrators and distributors. Consultants design and specify, as do integrators. The direct relationship for the customer, however, is either with the technology consultant / architect or the integrator reseller. But the integrator reseller are the ones who sell the equipment and the most likely to deal with electronic waste. Now, relying on the integrator or even the customer to responsibly discard our products is not sustainable. Without the whole industry's involvement, finding a solution will become overwhelming, and the millions of tons of dumped, burned, and buried electronic waste will only continue to grow. Without the whole industry's involvement, finding a solution will become overwhelming. And with that growth of electronic waste, several local and state governments may tell you how to get rid of it, but most don't. In fact, if you try to get an answer from a state or local EPA or a state and local government, you'll find that they don't have the answer for you as far as electronic waste is concerned. We'd like to know what you think about electronic waste and the industry. If you can, take 5 minutes and respond in chat. We'll compile your answers and discuss them at the end of the session. So these are the questions we'd like you to discuss or put down your thoughts. You know, what challenges and obstacles do you think we as an industry face in recycling and reuse, which are caused by the design and the manufacture of commercial AV products? Secondly, what changes would you make to products to make them more sustainable and easier to recycle or repurpose? And finally, what information from manufacturers would help the rest of the industry and end users make responsible decisions about what and how to recycle or dispose? So go ahead, let's take 5 minutes and we'll compile your chat comments, and then at the end of the program, we'll discuss your ideas. We'll take one more minute, then we'll come back.
All right, team. So I just saw a couple of messages come in on a PM DM that the chat may have been disabled, the chat feature for the audience. So maybe we can just take a couple more minutes, and Adam will take a look and see if it's something we could repair live. And
Let's go ahead
we'll
and
let
do
you know
that.
here. Yeah. Although we do have some notes here, but it sounds like there may be something disabled. We're working on it.
So one other way that you can, if we cannot get this to work, you can also text me and I will share your comments at the end of the presentation.
Yeah, Suli, you can text me too. Perfect. Chat is up and working. Woo.
Thank you, Adam. So maybe we'll just add a little bit of time there for those that weren't able to put in their comments. All right, John, what do you think? Shall we continue?
We will continue. And if you've still got some ideas, just throw them into chat and we'll add them to our discussion at the end of the session. So, okay. Okay, we can go on to the next slide, Adam. So let's talk about AV equipment and its multiple owners, its multiple stages of ownership. It starts with the manufacturer, and then the distributor owns it, and then the integrator owns it, and then the end user. And at the end of its life, there's not a whole lot of accountability from the previous owners. But we really need to accept the role that we're all accountable for the waste that our industry generates. Best practices for disposal can't work unless everyone agrees to them in the chain of ownership and endorses them and continues to support them throughout the life to the death of that product. So how do we start? That's really an important question, and it's a tough question for an industry that's in many ways siloed. If a product uses toxic materials, how would anyone know how to dispose of it? It could end up as just another box that's thrown in a dumpster, as we've seen. Could be buried in a landfill, shipped overseas, or end up in the Atlantic. Now, if we multiply that by thousands and thousands of discarded components throughout just the United States, what can you do? How do we start? How do we fix this? How do we stop the lack of accountability and the lack of knowledge of what we do and where it goes? SAVE as an organization can help the community of commercial AV, can help the AV industry, no matter your organization, manufacturer, reseller, distributor, integrator, consultant. We can help develop effective sustainability programs that are easy for you to articulate to both customers and suppliers. So here are the steps that we think should begin. You as an organization would create a simple description of how your organization endorses and supports sustainability in the AV industry. It's almost like a mission statement. Secondly, you would establish criteria on how unwanted AV products will be removed, stored, repurposed, or discarded. And the entire company has to endorse that. Now, in bid responses for large or small projects, include how you will deal with unwanted AV equipment. For the end user, and if there's a consultant involved or an architect, that will establish credibility with them and particularly with the end user. So ask AV manufacturers to eliminate unnecessary components like multiple power supplies and to identify materials that require special disposal methods. Now, we know this will likely be ignored, but the more we ask, the squeakier our wheel, the more likely we'll get an answer. Now, in the next segment, we'll discuss certified electronic waste recyclers, but integrators in particular should consider recruiting a certified electronics waste disposal company, either on your own or in collaboration with other AV or low voltage contractors and distributors in your market. Yes, even competitors, to reduce the cost. Now, we know that everyone, when they collaborate, is worried that you can start revealing trade secrets, but there are no trade secrets in a dumpster. If an AV organization would like to discuss best practices, let SAVE know. We'll talk it through. We'll help educate your employees. We'll assist with finding a better way to dispose of your unwanted equipment. It's a free service that we offer for the benefit of our industry as well as our world. I'm going to pass this to Joe now, who'll cover certified e-waste recyclers and what makes them different than others. Joe?
Thanks, John. So about half of the states have laws that either ban or regulate disposal of electronic waste. But some only limit the specific items like CRT monitors, and other states have no laws concerning e-waste whatsoever. But let's just say like Idaho, for instance, they ask their people to do their part. Without exception, states encourage their citizens to recycle electronics at a retailer that accepts it, like Best Buy or Staples and other retailers. These retailers have relationships with certified e-waste recyclers and disposal companies, which our industry really should emulate. Most of these state laws and regulations only apply to consumer electronics like phones and TVs and computers, laptops, etc. But businesses are required to obey federal laws, and dumping hazardous waste like lead from broken CRT or mercury from backlit LCD panels. But the EPA labels an item hazardous, if you remember, only if it's broken or disassembled. But what if you didn't know what was hazardous substance, right? Or what was in that AV equipment? And unless our manufacturers share that information with us, we just have to assume that all AV equipment contains hazardous or toxic materials. Regrettably, for the commercial AV industry, the responsibility for that disposal is ours. That means that we must identify responsible e-waste recycling companies that are close enough to collect it from us, or for us to drive and deliver it, right? A lot of work there. There are several organizations that certify e-waste recycling companies, but SAVE suggests that your search begin with a recycler that's certified as an e-steward, an electronic waste certification standard administered by the Basel Action Network. Among its broad environmental advocacy activities, one of the Basel Actions Network goals is ending illegal and unethical export and trade of toxic waste, especially electronic waste overseas. In 1989, the United Nations signed the Basel Convention Treaty, which restricted the international trade of toxic waste. Yet, there is still a massive flow of material that has created toxic dumps in Vietnam, Nigeria, and Accra, Ghana, and other developing nations. To confront this issue, the e-Steward certification program was introduced in 2009, which certifies recyclers to a strict environmental standard. Among its requirements, a Basel Action Network's e-Steward recycler must track all toxic materials downstream of the facilities and account for them to ensure proper management. Certifications are also offered to organizations who practice e-Steward standards of responsible recycling and reuse. R2. These are other e-waste recycling certifications that include like R2, responsible recycling, and RIO's recycling industry. Recycling industry operations standards, which have been established by NSF, a global organization that develops standards for recycling and other industries. R2 certifies, R2 certification establishes a set of processes, safety protocols, and documentation for businesses that repair or recycle used electronics. It addresses worker safety, environmental protection, and illegal compliance. RIO's, on the other hand, focuses on quality, environmental health, and safety. And it's common for both of these recycling companies to have both the R2 and the RIO certification. So next I'll pass it back to John. He'll explain and explore the cost of recycling, and disposal. John?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Yeah, recycling does cost money. It's more than just trash pickup, but very few people understand why. Recycling an unwanted AV product like a flat panel is 5 to 10 times more expensive than just placing it in a landfill. In recycling, the unwanted equipment has to be retrieved and then shipped to a facility where the components are disassembled, identified, and then separated into basic materials: plastic, glass, metal, toxic elements. Whole components that can be resold, like microchips, are also isolated and categorized. So there's a lot of labor involved with recycling. Now, the AV industry prospers because of that linear path of a product's life. But there's nothing sustainable in create, consume, use, dispose, replace. That's the life cycle right there. Our manufacturers know that new products are cheaper to make and more profitable than upgrading old ones. And because of technology advances within the environment that the product operates, the existing product quickly becomes obsolete. So recycling makes economic sense because it recovers non-renewable materials like lead, gallium, gold, aluminum, platinum, copper, zinc, silver, all of which are used in electronics. So as an example, geologists estimate that we, as a world community, throughout history, we've already used 75% of all the copper in the earth. Now consider that when you see 1,000 feet of coax in a dumpster. According to the United Nations Global E-Waste Monitor report, at least $10 billion worth of gold, platinum, copper, and other precious metals are dumped every year. Now, we can't afford any longer to think of recycling as too expensive. To our industry, to our customers, communities, and to the planet, the price tag of dumped electronic waste goes well beyond the cost of recycling and reuse. It's estimated that by 2030, seven years from now, essentially, the amount of electronic waste will exceed 75 million metric tons per year. 2030, the same year designated for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Waste disposal companies base their prices on volume and weight. So one way to look at the cost of proper disposal is how much weight we will be removing from that 75 million metric tons per year. If the AV industry adopted a recycling and reuse practice, we could reduce that by thousands of tons. A way to increase the quantity and reduce the price is for AV companies to collaborate. Yes, with competitors, with end users, distributors, and individual markets to contract with an e-waste disposal service. You can also consider passing on a basic recycling disposal cost, and our industry should consider making this universal. For every item that is removed from a customer's site, everyone pays several dollars to replace car tires or make deposits on car batteries or to recycle mattresses. Even shipping companies and airlines have added recovery costs to their rates. Now, reasonable charges for recycling and disposing of an end-of-life product should be no surprise to a customer. SAVE can help design a set of best practices in recycling and disposal for the AV industry, because we believe that our industry is ready and required to do its part in safeguarding the future. Because there is no away when we throw it away. Christina?
Thank you so much for sharing with us this very insightful educational session spotlighting the critical issue around controlling e-waste in the AV industry. I wanted to circle back on some of the ideas and comments that came up earlier in our session from members of our audience. I'm going to start with the first one, which is AV manufacturers should include an infographic showing what the consequences will be if the item is not disposed of correctly. John, do you want to comment on that?
You're muted, John.
Yeah. I think it's a very effective idea. I think that if that is established in the beginning of a product's life, it's going to be forgotten about unless it's a big label on top of a projector or on top of a flat panel or the back of a flat panel that says, if you throw this out the wrong way, you're going to be poisoning the environment. Or, you know, the problem with that is that manufacturers then may invite a certain level of liability to their products. And I don't think they want to do that. So I think it's a great idea, but it may have to manifest itself in a different way.
Thank you, John. Here's a second idea that came up. If manufacturers would provide the toxic ingredients of their products so the equipment could be recycled effectively, most end users don't know really what's in the box they have. What do you say about that, John?
Of course, it's absolutely right. Nobody knows what's inside that electronics that you've got, that you're holding. None of us knew when we were growing up watching CRT TVs that you know, we had 4 to 6 pounds of lead in front of us. It was a large monitor. You know, there was a reason your mother said don't sit too close to the TV. It wasn't because of the lead, it was because of the x-rays. So the problem again with that is manufacturers' willingness to accept responsibility for the products that they make, for the elements that they use, the toxic elements, the metals and so on that they use in electronics. There already are manufacturers that admit what they use and explain what they use in computer systems, in audio equipment and consumer equipment and phones and so on. That's pretty well known. And the industry, the consumer electronics industry, which is, you know, a lot of them are also part of the commercial AV industry, have been very responsible about that. So I think it's just a matter of getting them to agree to admit these things, to explain what's in the product, and then allow us to share it with our customers.
Thank you.
And if I may add to that as well, I think that awareness is really what we're talking about here, right? Making everyone aware of those active ingredients, and but we have to read those ingredients too. So that's why there is that responsibility factor in with, you know, last person who owns this device.
Okay, this is another idea. I think this is an idea whose time has come. Manufacturers offering a return for proper disposal of the products that are ending their first life. What do you say about that, Joe?
Well, you know, fortunately, I was able to. That's a great comment, by the way. And fortunately, I was able to take a tour at a local recycler where just that is happening. where printers and displays are being broken down and the plastic is being compacted and being sent right back to that manufacturer so they could reuse that same plastic. But there's not enough of that happening. I think we just need to take that and learn from it.
And also, Joe, there are a couple of manufacturers that are already doing that in a very small way, and mostly in the way of consumer electronics. Logitech has a program where you can go online, go to Logitech products, and there's a link to a way to ship back a product. Now, unfortunately, it's not a meetup. It's it's not any of their pro AV stuff. It's mostly, consumer audio stuff or computer related stuff. So it's kind of minimal. And like other manufacturers, and nothing against Logitech, they're a great company, but like other manufacturers, they really make a big deal of it, about sustainability on their website. But then you've got to dive in and find out exactly what it is that we're talking about. What product lines are we talking about? Samsung is another company that has stepped forward along with Logitech to the front of the line about sustainability. And again, in their computer and consumer electronics divisions, they've had a very strong presence in trying to direct customers and end users about how to dispose of products or to take products back in some ways, and also have some agreements with some recyclers. The problem is finding a recycler who is sanctioned and endorsed and hired by that manufacturer to be able to recycle their product. The other problem is integrators. Let's say an integrator might have, 5 Samsung's monitors in their conference rooms. They also have, biamp mixers. They've got Crestron control processors. It's across the board. We got a lot of stuff that we have to pay attention to.
Well, thank you, John. It sounds like we are at the beginning of a journey, and there's a long ways to go in that front. The fourth thing that I wanted to bring up, or an idea that was brought up, is how about government incentive programs to help integrators properly recycle and do the right thing?
Which government?
And reuse AV equipment.
Joe, what do you think?
We're still looking. It isn't there.
Yeah, there are no government
I know
programs.
there's no currently, but the idea was there should be, after all, there's all kinds of tax deductions, tax loopholes, incentive programs for other things. Why not for doing the right thing?
So we have 2 very, very good lobbying organizations in the AV industry. One is AVIXA, whose job it is to lobby governments, and then NSCA, whose job isn't necessarily, and you're on the board, Christina, isn't necessarily to lobby, but they certainly have a lot of input into standard certifications, into discussions of technical resources and so on with government representatives. I think that's something that we could very easily ask our trade organizations to take a shot at.
Really good point, John, and I think that that's something that we'll need to follow up on. Hey, so the last one is this is another idea, great idea. Having the integrator include recycling as part of their scope of work. Also, recycling and disposing of the old equipment being replaced often isn't part of the scope when it comes to upgrading. So by the time things are done, there's a pile of old gear that nobody wants and nobody knows what to do. So I guess the idea is, have that discussion upfront with the customer as you're developing the scope of work, and the proper disposal and recycling of equipment is part of the scope. Joe, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe there's a lot of value added for the integrator in order to who brings that to the table to the customer. I think we're fortunate that we have been thinking about this for some time, and we have had those conversations with the customers, or customers have come to us to ask us about what we can do. And we generally have been involved with the first refresh of those rooms. So we know the history on the product, and we know that it could be reused. And we offer that as well as an option for us to take it back and deliver it to where it could be put back to good use. And that is part of the Save a Second Life program, right? But in terms of the recycling part, again, finding those partners that responsibly recycle, I think is key here. And making sure that you're taking that product and immediately working it out with them to deliver that product to them so that they could dispose of it responsibly, so that it doesn't end up in your warehouse. We saw the poll responses there. So great comment.
And I might add, Joe, to work with manufacturers like Logitech and Samsung who've already recognized the importance of sustainability in the industry, and ask them to help find another purpose, another life for their product, because they don't want it to go. They don't want their products to go on the secondary market and be sold and compete with their first line products. But they could certainly find areas where they, as organizations, can assist in donating or dedicating that used product to organizations that don't have the resources to buy new.
Great point.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone in the audience, for submitting your great ideas and comments. And with that, I want to thank everyone for joining our educational session today, spotlighting this very critical issue about controlling e-waste in the AV industry. This educational session has been recorded and will be sent out to everyone who has attended the session today. I encourage you to get involved with Save a Second Life, which is responsible for developing guidelines, programs about repair, reuse, repurpose, recycling, and proper disposal of AV equipment. Joe Perez, as I mentioned at the beginning, is chair of the Save a Second Life Committee, and we'll be scheduling a meeting soon with the committee. So please let Joe Perez know if you're interested in joining. We have his email address on the screen here. We also invite you to be part of the SAVE Certified Committee focused on providing companies and organizations with education programs, assessment tools to assist them in developing plans to align their businesses with the SDGs. We just completed a SAVE certification program with Debbie Williamson and her team at Tempest Technologies, and we will be going through a SAVE certification program with Joe Way and his team at USC in November, who are part of the HETMA, or Higher Education Technology Managers Alliance. So we will also be scheduling a committee meeting very soon. And if you're interested in joining the SAVE Certified Committee, please contact Twee, who is our volunteers coordinator, and her email address is also listed. With that, we're going to close this today. One more thing, please check out our website for more information about our incentive programs and initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you all.